Ancient Egypt did not last for a few famous kings. It lasted for nearly 3,000 years, and every era came with a fight to survive. This timeline shows how a small group of early rulers on the Nile grew into a powerful state, how they built the first pyramids, how their kingdoms rose, collapsed, and rose again, and how new leaders kept pushing the civilization forward. The deeper this journey goes, the more surprising the story becomes, including the turning points that pushed the entire system toward its final breaking point. The Nile Valley was not always the home of a great civilization. It began with scattered communities living close to the river because it offered water, fish, and fertile soil. These early groups learned how the annual flood left behind rich layers of silt, allowing them to grow more food than before. As harvests improved, families stayed in one place longer, and small villages began forming along the riverbanks. This stability created the first steps toward organized society, and it set the stage for a future that no one living there could have predicted. As these villages expanded, people needed better ways to manage food, land, and water. The predictable flood cycles meant that with planning, communities could store grain and handle lean seasons more effectively. This planning created a sense of order and encouraged leaders to step forward to manage labor and resources. Over time, certain individuals gained influence by directing farming schedules and settling disputes. These early power structures were simple, yet they shaped how larger leadership would eventually form. Every harvest strengthened the idea that organized rule could protect and improve life along the Nile. With more people competing for farmland and access to the river, leadership started shifting from shared community decisions to single strong figures. These leaders controlled storage sites, organized farming tasks, and protected villages from nearby rivals. Their ability to manage resources made them essential, but it also created competition between them. Some leaders pushed beyond their villages, taking control of smaller communities nearby. As each group grew stronger, the idea of controlling larger sections of land became appealing, and early political tension began forming. The groundwork for regional power was beginning to take shape. Two main regions began forming along the Nile, Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north. Each region developed its own symbols, traditions, and leadership styles. Upper Egypt favored strong, centralized leaders who often controlled trade routes running deeper into Africa. Lower Egypt, closer to the Mediterranean, relied more on trade with foreign visitors. These differences influenced how each region viewed power and identity. As populations grew, these regional rulers began noticing the benefits of expanding their influence. The stage was set for rising competition between two separate centers of growing authority. Upper Egypt developed an advantage that would reshape all of Egyptian history. Its leaders controlled long stretches of the river, giving them better oversight of farmland and trade. Their access to valuable materials through southern routes strengthened their economies. With more resources, their armies became organized and disciplined. This allowed Upper Egyptian rulers to push outward, challenging neighboring districts. Their growing strength encouraged ambitions that extended far beyond local borders. As this momentum built, the idea of unifying all lands along the Nile no longer seemed impossible, creating a turning point that would change everything. As Upper Egypt grew stronger, its leaders saw the benefits of expanding north. A larger territory meant more farmland, more people, and more resources under one ruler. These ambitions encouraged military campaigns aimed at absorbing smaller districts. Victories increased confidence, and success made the idea of a single unified kingdom more appealing. Rival regions recognized that resisting this expansion would be difficult, but many local leaders still held their positions firmly. The struggle for dominance intensified, shaping the early blueprint of what would later become a powerful and unified state. A powerful Upper Egyptian ruler emerged with a clear goal, bringing as many districts as possible under his command. His campaigns were well-planned and steady, targeting regions that controlled key trade routes or strategic river segments. As victories accumulated, his reputation grew, and more villages surrendered before battles even began. His ability to organize troops and secure supply lines set him apart from earlier leaders. Each successful campaign sent a message that resistance would only delay the inevitable. The momentum behind unification gained speed, creating pressure on Lower Egypt to prepare for a decisive confrontation. The idea of one ruler controlling both Upper and Lower Egypt became more than ambition. It started to feel achievable. Many people living along the Nile began accepting the possibility of a single leader who could bring order and stability. Traders imagined safer routes, farmers hoped for better protection, and local officials considered the benefits of being part of a larger system. This shift in thinking mattered as much as military victories. A unified identity started forming in people's minds, even before the final conflicts occurred, laying the emotional foundation for the future kingdom. Conflict between Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt intensified as both sides understood what was at stake. Control of the delta meant access to the sea, foreign trade, and rich farmland. Control of the south meant dominance over internal routes and resources. The decisive confrontation was not a single battle but a series of struggles that weakened Lower Egypt's leaders. Bit by bit, Upper Egyptian forces pushed forward, claiming strategic territory. The balance shifted until the remaining power in the north could no longer hold. A breakthrough was coming, one that would reshape the entire Nile Valley. With Lower Egypt weakened and Upper Egypt pressing forward, the final steps toward unification unfolded. Control of the delta was secured, bringing the two regions under one ruler for the first time. This moment marked the birth of the first centralized Egyptian state. The new ruler adopted symbols representing both Upper and Lower Egypt, signaling unity and shared identity. This unified kingdom needed strong management to survive, but the foundation was finally in place. From this point forward, Egypt would operate as a single, powerful entity stretching from the delta to the southern riverbanks. The new unified kingdom needed a way to run its growing network of people, farms, and trade. The ruler established a royal court that served as the center of authority. Officials were assigned to oversee grain collection, farmland distribution, and labor organization. Regional representatives sent reports to the capital, creating a system that allowed the ruler to maintain control even across vast distances. This structure helped prevent local leaders from gaining too much independence. The early framework of government was simple, but it created stability and strengthened the idea that one ruler could successfully manage all of Egypt. As the government expanded, the need to record information grew. Early writing systems developed to track grain storage, land ownership, and taxation. These records were carved into clay or written on papyrus, allowing officials to monitor supplies and plan harvest cycles. Writing also helped organize labor for construction and irrigation projects. This new ability to document information made administration more reliable and reduced confusion. Over time, writing became a defining feature of Egyptian civilization. Its emergence strengthened the king's control, ensured accountability, and opened the door for future advancements in culture, religion, and architecture. Religion became deeply tied to leadership as the unified kingdom grew. The ruler was seen not only as a political leader, but also as a figure connected to divine forces. This belief system helped strengthen loyalty and justify authority. Temples were built to honor important gods, and rituals reinforced the idea that the ruler protected the land with divine support. These practices encouraged cooperation across regions that previously operated independently. By linking leadership to spiritual power, the early kings created a foundation that made centralized rule feel natural, unifying people through shared beliefs and structured traditions. Early kings began building tombs to secure their place in the afterlife and display their status. These tombs were simple at first, but they grew larger as rulers competed to leave stronger legacies. Skilled workers carved chambers, decorated walls, and created burial goods to accompany the ruler after death. These projects required organized labor and reliable food supplies, demonstrating how far the centralized system had come. Large tombs also reinforced the ruler's importance, showing the population that their leader's authority extended beyond life. These burial structures became symbols of order, stability, and rising ambition within the young kingdom. Trade routes expanded as Egypt became more unified and organized. Rulers sent expeditions to nearby regions seeking wood, metals, and valuable stones that were not available along the Nile. These materials supported construction, tool-making, and religious ceremonies. Trade also introduced new ideas and strengthened relationships with neighboring cultures. The increased flow of goods required careful planning and strong leadership to maintain safe travel. Each successful expedition boosted the ruler's reputation and encouraged more exploration. These growing connections helped Egypt become a more influential presence, setting the stage for larger projects and stronger kingdoms in the centuries ahead. As Egypt's early systems grew stronger, new farming tools and improved irrigation methods helped support larger populations. Farmers could direct water more efficiently, allowing them to plant wider fields and store more grain each season. This progress strengthened the kingdom by increasing stability and reducing the risk of famine. Leaders understood that food security meant fewer uprisings, so they invested heavily in keeping irrigation channels clear and functional. These advancements created a dependable foundation for future rulers, giving them confidence to pursue bigger projects and build a more organized society across the expanding Nile region. With greater control over farming and trade, early kings pushed to create consistent rules across the entire kingdom. They standardized measurements, defined tax responsibilities, and enforced systems that made life more predictable for the population. Officials traveled between towns to ensure these rules were followed, and written records helped track progress. These changes helped unify people from different regions who previously lived under separate customs. A shared structure made communication easier and strengthened loyalty toward the central government. This stability encouraged growth and set the stage for more ambitious state-led projects that would soon transform Egypt. As Egypt became more organized, rulers encouraged the development of tools and farming techniques that boosted production further. New plow designs helped loosen soil better, and improved methods for storing grain reduced waste. These advances made harvests more reliable, supporting larger workforces and growing cities. The success of these tools pushed leaders to support innovation because it strengthened their power. More food meant more workers available for major projects, allowing rulers to plan construction efforts that required thousands of laborers. The kingdom was approaching a turning point where increased efficiency would lead to monumental achievements. Symbols and rituals became key tools for early kings to create a unified identity across Egypt. Official ceremonies reinforced loyalty, while royal imagery appeared on pottery, tools, and monuments. These symbols reminded people that they belonged to a single kingdom with shared beliefs and purpose. Festivals and public gatherings showed the population that their rulers held authority through both tradition and their connection to sacred powers. This growing cultural unity made it easier for rulers to command labor for large projects. As these symbolic practices spread, they strengthened the idea that Egypt worked best under one strong leader. The ambition of Egypt's early rulers began shifting from survival to legacy. They wanted structures that could display their power long after their reigns ended. These early leaders started exploring larger building projects, including advanced tombs and ceremonial complexes. They studied stoneworking techniques and tested new designs, pushing the boundaries of what their workers could achieve. These efforts marked the beginning of Egypt's move toward monumental construction that would redefine the ancient world. The focus on durability and scale created expectations that future rulers would try to surpass, setting in motion a competition that shaped Egypt's identity. The Old Kingdom emerged as a new chapter defined by strong rulers and organized government systems. Pharaohs used the foundation built by earlier kings to centralize authority even further. They positioned loyal officials across the land, making sure every region contributed labor and resources. This era encouraged large-scale projects that required extensive planning and long-term commitment. With stability and abundant food supplies, leaders believed they could achieve feats that earlier generations only imagined. The Old Kingdom marked the beginning of Egypt's most iconic monuments, fueled by confidence, order, and a desire to create structures that would endure. Old Kingdom rulers reorganized their administration to maintain tighter control over labor and distribution. Skilled overseers managed teams of workers who built temples, irrigation channels, and storage facilities. By refining the hierarchy within the government, pharaohs ensured that supplies reached construction sites and farms operated smoothly. This structured approach allowed leaders to support massive projects without collapsing the economy. Each layer of the administration reported directly to higher officials, strengthening unity across the kingdom. This organized leadership made it possible for pharaohs to think bigger, preparing the way for groundbreaking achievements that defined the Old Kingdom. Pharaoh Djoser became one of the first rulers to pursue a monumental project that changed Egypt's architectural future. He sought a tomb unlike anything before, turning to his skilled advisor and architect to design something new. Instead of simple mastaba tombs, they planned a stacked stone structure rising in steps. This design marked a major shift because it required precise engineering, large workforces, and an organized supply chain. The step pyramid represented the first time Egypt attempted such a massive stone project, proving that the kingdom could handle challenges far beyond earlier expectations. Imhotep, serving as Djoser's architect, engineered the step pyramid with remarkable innovation. He studied earlier burial structures and experimented with new building methods to create a stable design. His approach required workers to shape stones accurately and place them in layers that gradually formed a towering structure. Organizing thousands of laborers demanded strong leadership and advanced planning. The success of the step pyramid demonstrated that Egypt had the skills, coordination, and vision needed for monumental construction. This achievement inspired future rulers to push boundaries even further, proving that stone architecture could reflect the power and ambition of the state. The impact of Djoser's step pyramid encouraged later pharaohs to expand their ambitions. They wanted structures that were larger, more precise, and more impressive. This desire set off a wave of experimentation across construction sites, where architects tested new angles, materials, and methods. These early tests laid the groundwork for more advanced designs. Pharaohs recognized that monuments serve not only as tombs, but also as symbols of strength and unity. As building techniques improved, the scale of projects grew, creating expectations that each pharaoh would strive to leave a greater legacy than the one before. Sneferu became one of the most influential builders in Egyptian history by pursuing multiple pyramid projects. His determination to perfect the design led to a series of attempts that pushed engineering forward. Workers tested different angles and construction strategies, learning from mistakes as they built. These efforts showed how committed the state was to monumental architecture. Even when challenges surfaced, Sneferu's willingness to invest in numerous large structures demonstrated the resources available during his reign. His projects provided valuable experience that made future pyramids stronger and more stable, influencing how Egypt would build its most iconic monuments. Sneferu's experiments eventually led to the first true smooth-sided pyramid, a major breakthrough in ancient engineering. Achieving this required solving problems with weight distribution, stone alignment, and internal support systems. The success marked a shift from earlier step designs to a refined structure that represented precision and power. This accomplishment proved that Egyptian architects could handle complex projects with high accuracy. The smooth-sided pyramid became a model that future rulers aimed to replicate or surpass. Its completion strengthened Egypt's reputation for innovation and set the tone for the construction of even larger pyramids to come. Building pyramids required careful planning that stretched across years. Massive amounts of stone had to be transported, shaped, and placed with accuracy. Food and tools needed to reach workers consistently, demanding strong coordination across the kingdom. Leaders organized supply teams, labor villages, and transportation routes. Workers lived near construction sites, where they trained, ate, and rested under strict schedules. This large-scale organization demonstrated the strength of Egypt's centralized rule. Through these efforts, the pharaoh showed the population that the state could handle challenges that no other region in the ancient world attempted. Workers played a crucial role in pyramid construction, and their lives were more organized than many imagine. They lived in planned villages near the building sites, complete with bakeries, storage rooms, and medical care. These workers were not enslaved. They were part of a structured labor force supported by the state. Their routines were demanding, requiring discipline and teamwork. They transported heavy stones, maintained tools, and followed the instructions of skilled overseers. Their effort and coordination brought each massive structure closer to completion. Their work demonstrated the kingdom's ability to mobilize large groups for extraordinary tasks. Astronomy and mathematics became essential tools in pyramid construction. Builders used star alignments and shadow measurements to position each side of the pyramid with impressive accuracy. Knowledge of angles, weights, and distances helped shape internal chambers and passageways. This mathematical precision elevated Egyptian architecture beyond simple stacked stones. It showed how deeply science and planning were integrated into state projects. These advanced techniques allowed builders to push structural limits and create monuments that aligned perfectly with the sky. Their success strengthened confidence in Egypt's ability to combine knowledge, labor, and leadership into achievements unmatched anywhere else. Khufu rose to power determined to surpass all who came before him. He planned a pyramid larger than any previous structure, requiring vast resources and workforce coordination. This project demanded careful calculations and significant preparation. Stone from nearby quarries and distant regions had to be shipped and shaped with precision. Khufu's vision pushed the boundaries of engineering, turning his pyramid into the most ambitious construction effort the world had ever seen. His leadership ensured that every part of the project moved forward, reinforcing his authority and establishing a legacy that would endure for thousands of years. Khufu's Great Pyramid became the largest stone structure ever built at the time. Its sheer size required unmatched planning, including detailed layout designs, organized labor groups, and vast amounts of material. The project symbolized power on a scale few civilizations could imagine. Its construction showed how far Egypt's administrative systems had evolved. The precision of its angled sides and the alignment with cardinal directions demonstrated remarkable skill. Completing such a monumental project strengthened the state's confidence and set a new standard for all future rulers. The Great Pyramid became a symbol of unmatched ambition and capability. Khafre continued the tradition of grand building by constructing his own pyramid complex, which included the Great Sphinx. This massive statue, carved from a single limestone ridge, displayed the fusion of human and lion features to symbolize royal strength and protection. The Sphinx guarded the complex and reinforced the pharaoh's connection to sacred power. Khafre's pyramid stood slightly smaller than his father's, but maintained the architectural quality expected during this period. His reign showed the continuation of ambitious construction projects that expressed authority through scale, craftsmanship, and religious symbolism that shaped Egypt's identity. Monuments of the Old Kingdom reflected more than wealth. They demonstrated the pharaoh's control over land, labor, and belief systems. These structures reinforced the idea that the ruler held spiritual and political power. Temples, pyramids, and ceremonial complexes displayed Egypt's ability to plan far into the future. Their impressive size made them visible reminders of centralized authority. The population understood that only a stable and organized state could build on such a scale. This connection between leadership and construction created expectations that pharaohs would continue producing monumental works to prove their legitimacy. Pharaohs relied on wealth and resources to maintain loyalty among regional leaders. Gifts, land grants, and privileges helped secure cooperation from influential officials. These figures became essential for supplying labor and keeping order in distant regions. As projects grew larger, the state needed strong relationships across the kingdom. Maintaining this balance ensured that pharaohs could continue building monumental structures without resistance. Ties between the central government and local authorities shaped Egypt's political landscape, creating a system where loyalty was rewarded and ambition was monitored. This balance supported the kingdom during its most ambitious building periods. Despite years of success, the central government began showing signs of strain. The massive resources spent on pyramid construction placed pressure on the economy. Managing large workforces required steady food supplies, which became harder during poor flood years. Officials struggled to meet demands from the capital, creating tension between local regions and the central authority. These growing challenges revealed the limits of the system. Even with strong leadership, Egypt needed consistent stability to maintain its momentum. As problems increased, cracks in the once solid structure of the Old Kingdom became more visible, hinting at deeper issues ahead. Regional leaders began gaining more independence as the central government weakened. These officials controlled local resources and sometimes made decisions without approval from the capital. Their growing influence reduced the pharaoh's ability to enforce nationwide unity. Without strong oversight, regions started acting on their own interests. This shift undermined the centralized system that had supported massive building projects. As local leaders built their own power bases, the balance of authority tilted away from the pharaoh. This increasing fragmentation signaled the beginning of a decline that would soon affect every part of the kingdom. Egypt faced environmental challenges as drought reduced the Nile's flood levels. Lower floods meant smaller harvests, less stored grain, and fewer resources for construction. Food shortages created tension among the population, making it difficult for leaders to maintain order. The government struggled to respond quickly, and the strain exposed weak points in the administrative system. Without abundant grain, officials could not support large workforces and labor projects slowed. These setbacks weakened the pharaoh's authority and increased pressure on regional leaders to protect their own communities. The problems facing Egypt were now too large to ignore. As shortages continued and regional leaders grew more independent, the central government lost much of its influence. Tensions rose between different parts of the kingdom, and conflicts broke out as leaders tried to protect their resources. The once unified state fractured into separate regions, each controlled by local rulers who claimed authority. Trade slowed, construction projects halted, and communication became unreliable. This collapse of centralized rule marked the start of the First Intermediate Period. The stability that once fueled Egypt's growth had broken apart, leaving the population uncertain about the future of their civilization. With Egypt divided, multiple local rulers competed for power, creating a landscape filled with rivalry and shifting alliances. The North and South developed their own traditions, leaders, and ambitions. Without a single pharaoh to guide the kingdom, unity faded and regional conflict reshaped daily life. Trade networks weakened and cities focused on survival rather than large-scale projects. Although fragmented, these regions continued to develop their own identities and systems. The First Intermediate Period became a time of experimentation, struggle, and transformation, preparing the way for new powers that would later rise and attempt to reunite the country. Egypt entered the First Intermediate Period with its power divided among competing regions. Local rulers controlled their own territories, each claiming legitimacy and authority. Without a unified central government, cities began developing their own traditions, leadership styles, and priorities. Some areas focused on strengthening defenses, while others expanded trade with nearby regions to survive. The lack of national unity created constant shifts in alliances. Communities adapted to unstable conditions by relying on strong local leadership rather than distant authority. This period reshaped everyday life, forcing people to navigate a landscape where loyalty and stability changed from place to place. As regional power grew, rival cities began forming their own cultural identities. Differences in art, burial styles, and religious practices became more visible. Some regions developed unique architectural designs to show independence. Others formed tight-knit political groups to protect themselves from neighboring threats. These variations highlighted how much Egypt had changed since the days of unified rule. Local leaders used these cultural expressions to build support among their people. While these developments created creativity and new ideas, they also deepened divisions that made reunifying the country more difficult. Egypt had become a patchwork of competing interests. Trade routes that once flowed smoothly across Egypt slowed down as conflict increased. Local rulers placed restrictions on goods moving through their territories, and tensions limited cooperation among regions. Cities that depended on imported supplies struggled, while others tried to create new networks outside Egypt. The lack of stable trade weakened economies and reduced access to valuable materials like copper, wood, and luxury goods. Without these resources, construction projects halted and skilled workers left certain areas. The disruptions added pressure on already strained communities, making recovery more complicated and extending the period of instability across the land. Amid the shifting landscape, Thebes began rising as a strong contender for future reunification. Located in Upper Egypt, it had access to key trade routes and farmland that supported its growing influence. The Theban rulers focused on building a stable local government while strengthening their military presence. They used strategic alliances and careful planning to expand their reach. As Thebes grew more powerful, its leadership gained confidence that it could reunite Egypt under a single authority again. The region's steady growth marked the beginning of a new push toward restoring national unity and rebuilding the country's former strength. The Theban leaders believed that restoring Egypt required a combination of military strength and administrative skill. They began campaigns to reclaim nearby regions that had broken away during the chaos. These efforts were gradual but determined, showing that Thebes aimed not just for survival but for leadership over a unified kingdom. Their strategy focused on controlling key river sections and absorbing smaller districts that lacked strong defenses. As victories accumulated, Theban influence spread north. Each step brought them closer to challenging the remaining powerful regions, setting the stage for a long and difficult struggle to reunite the country. The Pits launched military campaigns that pushed steadily through fragmented territories. Their forces targeted regions weakened by internal disputes or lacking strong defenses. Each campaign required careful coordination, as Theban leaders needed to secure supply lines and maintain loyalty from newly controlled areas. Victory often depended on understanding local conditions and building trust with populations tired of instability. These efforts expanded Theban control along important stretches of the Nile. The growing momentum made Thebes the strongest power in Upper Egypt, giving it the confidence to challenge other leaders who claimed authority over the fractured kingdom. After years of advancing through divided territories, Theban forces achieved a decisive breakthrough that allowed them to reclaim the north. Their victory marked the end of major resistance and brought Egypt under a single ruler once again. The reunification restored central authority and ended the regional rivalries that had weakened the country for generations. This moment brought relief to many communities that longed for stability. With the nation united, leaders could focus on rebuilding the systems that once made Egypt strong. The foundations were set for a new era known as the Middle Kingdom, defined by renewed order. The Middle Kingdom began with a strong emphasis on rebuilding government systems and restoring stability. Pharaohs worked to strengthen authority across all regions, ensuring that local leaders remained loyal and cooperative. They focused on repairing damage caused during the years of division, bringing trade and agriculture back to reliable levels. This renewed unity encouraged cultural and economic growth. Leaders promoted fairness within the administration and supported projects that improved life throughout the kingdom. The Middle Kingdom became known for its balanced leadership and strong sense of national identity, setting the stage for significant advancements in art, literature, and architecture. Middle Kingdom rulers prioritized repairing and improving irrigation systems that had deteriorated during years of conflict. Workers cleared canals, rebuilt water channels, and expanded farmland to support rising populations. These efforts restored food security and strengthened the economy. The reliable flow of crops helped stabilize communities and allowed the government to collect steady taxes. With dependable harvests, leaders could support military operations and construction projects that reinforced their authority. The improvements in agriculture created confidence across the kingdom, helping Egypt regain the stability it had lost and ensuring that people felt supported under the renewed central government. Trade expanded as Middle Kingdom rulers reached beyond Egypt's borders to secure valuable materials. Expeditions traveled to Nubia for gold, the Levant for timber, and nearby regions for essential goods not found along the Nile. These exchanges strengthened diplomatic ties and increased Egypt's influence. New trade relationships brought fresh ideas, tools, and cultural practices that enriched daily life. The increased wealth supported construction projects and allowed the government to reward loyal officials. As trade flourished, Egypt regained its role as a major power in the ancient world, further stabilizing the kingdom and encouraging growth across many fields. The Middle Kingdom became known for its advances in literature, as scribes produced stories, teachings, and records that offered insight into daily life and leadership. These works included moral lessons, tales about journeys, and reflections on responsibility. Writing became a respected skill, and educated individuals played important roles in government. Schools trained new scribes who helped maintain the administrative system and preserve cultural knowledge. The spread of literature strengthened the kingdom's identity and gave future generations a deeper understanding of Egypt's values. These writings became some of the most important cultural achievements of the period. Art in the Middle Kingdom grew more detailed and accessible, appearing not only in royal tombs but also in those belonging to officials and workers. Scenes of farming, crafting, and family life were painted with greater accuracy, showing a wider view of Egyptian society. Sculptures became more expressive, reflecting individual characteristics rather than idealized forms. This artistic shift demonstrated pride in daily life and the growing influence of the middle class. As art spread across the kingdom, it reinforced shared values and strengthened cultural unity. These creative expressions became lasting representations of life during this prosperous era. Middle Kingdom rulers invested in building temple complexes and fortress networks to secure Egypt's borders. Fortresses along the southern frontier, helped protect trade routes and manage relations with Nubia. Temples reinforced the pharaoh's connection to religious authority and served as economic centers for nearby towns. These major construction efforts required skilled workers, organized logistics, and strong leadership. The expansion of temples and fortresses displayed Egypt's growing power and created lasting structures that influenced regional culture. These projects helped stabilize the kingdom and strengthen protection against threats that might challenge its renewed stability. To prevent unrest, Middle Kingdom pharaohs kept regional governors under strict oversight. They reduced the power that had once allowed local leaders to act independently during earlier periods of instability. Officials were rotated or monitored closely to ensure loyalty. This system limited opportunities for rebellion and encouraged cooperation across the kingdom. By balancing authority more effectively, pharaohs maintained stronger central control. This administrative approach helped the Middle Kingdom avoid the fragmentation that had previously led to decline. It allowed the government to direct resources more efficiently and focus on long-term growth rather than constant internal conflict. The Middle Kingdom pushed south into Nubia, driven by the desire for gold, trade routes, and strategic territory. Fortresses were built to secure the region and protect Egyptian interests. Control of Nubia provided access to valuable goods that strengthened Egypt's economy and increased its influence. The expansion required organized military campaigns and ongoing management of frontier areas. These efforts strengthened the kingdom's borders and allowed rulers to maintain steady supplies of essential materials. Nubia became a crucial part of Egypt's growth during this period, contributing significantly to the wealth that supported major projects and administrative reforms. Middle Kingdom rulers maintained long periods of stability, supported by strong leadership, steady agriculture, and reliable trade. Their ability to manage resources effectively allowed the kingdom to grow culturally and economically. Large building projects flourished and the population enjoyed greater security than in earlier times. This era became known for balanced decision-making and a focus on improving everyday life. The government worked closely with officials across the land to maintain order and prevent regional conflicts. The success of these rulers created one of the most admired periods in Egyptian history, remembered for fairness and effective administration. Over time, internal problems began resurfacing as regional leaders slowly gained influence again. Some governors acquired wealth and authority that challenged the balance maintained by earlier pharaohs. Their growing independence created gaps in the administrative system, making it harder for the government to enforce consistent policies. These issues were subtle at first, but became more noticeable as officials pursued their own interests. The strain weakened the connection between the central government and distant regions. These changes hinted at the early stages of decline that would affect the Middle Kingdom's stability and open the door to future challenges. Environmental shifts created new difficulties, as reduced flooding affected the productivity of farmland. Lower harvests strained the kingdom's food supplies and placed pressure on families and workers. The government struggled to maintain irrigation systems at previous levels while dealing with rising demands. These challenges created tension in communities that relied on consistent harvests to survive. With fewer resources available, it became harder for pharaohs to support major projects and uphold loyalty among regional leaders. The weakening agricultural base signaled a turning point, making it clear that the Middle Kingdom faced obstacles it could not easily overcome. Foreign groups began entering the Delta region during this weakened period, bringing new tools, customs, and ideas. Among them were the Hyksos, who gradually gained influence by controlling key towns and trade centers. Their arrival changed the balance of power in northern Egypt. Local leaders, already struggling with internal issues, found it difficult to push them back. The Hyksos used advanced technologies that gave them military advantages. As they expanded their control, they reshaped the political landscape. Their growing presence set the stage for a major shift in Egyptian rule and marked the beginning of another turbulent era. Egypt entered the Second Intermediate Period as the Hyksos established authority over the northern region. Their rule introduced new technologies and political changes that blended with existing Egyptian customs. Meanwhile, native rulers in the south maintained their independence but struggled to regain lost territory. The division created tension and competition between the northern and southern powers. Trade and communication became complicated, and the kingdom's unity was disrupted once again. This period of foreign influence forced Egyptians to adapt while preparing for a future conflict that would determine the country's next great transformation. The Hyksos solidified their control in northern Egypt by forming strong alliances and using technological advantages. Their use of horse-drawn chariots and advanced weaponry gave them a powerful edge over local forces. They established a capital in the Delta region, integrating Egyptian traditions into their rule while maintaining their own customs. Their presence introduced new cultural elements, influencing local art, tools, and warfare. While some Egyptians adapted to this new leadership, others viewed it as a threat to their identity. The Hyksos rise set the stage for a prolonged struggle for control of the entire country. The introduction of horse-drawn chariots, composite bows, and improved armor changed the military landscape in Egypt. These innovations allowed the Hyksos to dominate northern territories and defend key routes. Their technology spread across regions, forcing southern rulers to study and adapt to these new methods. The presence of advanced weaponry disrupted traditional battle strategies and challenged long-standing assumptions about warfare. While the Hyksos gained strength through these tools, Egyptians began preparing for a future in which adopting similar advancements would be necessary for survival. The arms gap highlighted the need for southern leaders to modernize quickly. Amid Hyksos control, Thebes re-emerged as the center of Egyptian resistance in the south. Its rulers refused to accept foreign dominance and began planning strategies to reclaim the land. The band leadership studied the Hyksos military strengths and searched for ways to counter them. The city grew into a stronghold of national pride, attracting loyal followers determined to restore Egyptian rule. This period sparked a renewed sense of identity and purpose among southern Egyptians, who believed Thebes could lead the fight for independence. Tension increased as both sides prepared for confrontations that would determine Egypt's future direction. A series of determined Theban leaders began launching campaigns to challenge Hyksos rule. These efforts required years of planning, resource gathering, and military training. Thebes focused on developing better weapons and adopting improved tactics inspired by their rivals. Battles were intense and spread across large stretches of the Nile. Each victory strengthened Theban confidence, while every setback reinforced their resolve to continue fighting. These campaigns unified southern Egyptians under a common goal, creating momentum that slowly pushed their influence north. The struggle became a defining mission for Theban rulers seeking to restore Egypt's independence. The fight against the Hyksos stretched across generations, but the Bainan leaders kept advancing. Strategic victories allowed them to reclaim important cities and weaken Hyksos supply routes. The final phase of the conflict pushed deep into northern territory, targeting the heart of Hyksos power. After years of steady pressure, the Bainan forces achieved the breakthrough they had long sought. The Hyksos were expelled from Egypt, and native rule was restored. This victory marked the beginning of a new era known as the New Kingdom, where Egypt would rise to its greatest strength and influence in the ancient world. The Bainan victory opened the door for a full restructuring of Egypt's military and leadership. Rulers understood that survival depended on adapting to the new technologies introduced during foreign occupation. They invested heavily in training soldiers, improving weapon quality, and organizing troops into more efficient units. Chariots became central to battle strategy, and metalworking skills advanced rapidly. These changes transformed Egypt into a more formidable power than ever before. With foreign threats still present across the region, leaders focused on securing borders and strengthening defenses. The momentum built during this transition set the foundation for the new kingdom's rise. With renewed strength and unified leadership, Egypt entered the New Kingdom, a period defined by expansion, confidence, and unmatched ambition. Pharaohs recognized that power required more than strong defenses, so they pursued aggressive policies that aimed to extend control beyond traditional borders. They built a professional army capable of long-distance campaigns, supported by advanced logistics and improved communication. This new era encouraged bold decisions and large-scale projects that reflected Egypt's growing influence. The New Kingdom quickly became the most powerful phase in Egyptian history, reshaping the country's future and projecting its presence across the ancient world. Pharaohs reformed the military to create a more organized and capable fighting force. Soldiers trained with new weapons, chariots, and tactics that improved battlefield effectiveness. Specialized units formed to handle scouting, archery, and close combat, creating a versatile army that could face different types of enemies. Military leaders gained experience through constant training and border patrols. These changes allowed Egypt to project its power far beyond the Nile Valley. The improved military also strengthened the pharaoh's authority, ensuring that the state could respond quickly to threats and maintain control over expanding territories. Ambitious rulers sought to extend Egypt's borders to secure trade routes and influence neighboring regions. Their campaigns pushed into territories that offered strategic advantages or valuable resources. Successful missions brought new wealth, including metals, livestock, and skilled workers. These gains strengthened Egypt's economy and gave rulers more power to pursue additional goals. Expansion also increased Egypt's visibility in international politics, positioning it as a leading force in the region. The pursuit of new lands demanded strong leadership and steady supply lines, making military success a defining feature of the new kingdom's early growth. Military campaigns in the Levant became especially important, as these territories controlled key trade routes and access to foreign goods. Egypt sought control of these regions to secure safe passage for merchants and maintain economic strength. These efforts required extended missions involving large numbers of soldiers and supplies. Victories in these areas brought prestige to the pharaoh and demonstrated the effectiveness of Egypt's improved military. Control over the Levant helped stabilize trade and strengthen diplomatic relationships with surrounding powers. These successes expanded Egypt's influence and solidified its position as a dominant force in the ancient world. As Egypt secured territories through military campaigns, vast amounts of wealth flowed into the kingdom. Tribute from conquered regions included luxury items, precious metals, and skilled laborers who contributed to Egypt's growing prosperity. This influx of resources allowed rulers to fund construction projects, support temples, and maintain strong military forces. Wealth also increased social mobility as officials and workers gained rewards for their service. The abundance reinforced the pharaoh's status and strengthened loyalty across the land. Egypt's expanding economy became one of its greatest strengths, helping the new kingdom reach heights unmatched in earlier eras. Hatshepsut emerged as one of the most influential rulers of the new kingdom, known for stability and long-term planning. Instead of focusing on constant warfare, she emphasized trade, diplomacy, and monumental building. Her leadership brought peace and prosperity that allowed Egypt to flourish. She expanded trade routes to distant regions, bringing rare goods that enriched the kingdom. Her reign demonstrated that expansion did not always require conflict. Hatshepsut's balanced approach strengthened Egypt's economy and cultural development, proving that strategic leadership could elevate the nation without relying solely on military campaigns. Hatshepsut's most famous achievement was the construction of her temple at Deir el-Bahari. This massive structure showcased precise engineering, terraces, and detailed artwork that honored both the gods and her legacy. The temple served as a symbol of her commitment to stability and cultural expression. Its design reflected a shift toward architecture that blended beauty with power. Workers and artisans dedicated years to completing it, demonstrating Egypt's ability to create complex and enduring monuments. This temple became one of the most recognizable structures of the new kingdom, showing how effective leadership could produce achievements that lasted for generations. During the New Kingdom, Egypt strengthened diplomatic relationships with powerful neighbors. Rulers exchanged gifts, formed partnerships, and negotiated agreements to secure peace and maintain influence. These relationships brought foreign materials, new ideas, and skilled workers into Egypt. Diplomacy also reduced the need for constant warfare, allowing rulers to focus on building projects and internal development. Through these exchanges, Egypt positioned itself as a respected and influential presence across the region. The combination of diplomacy and strength allowed the kingdom to maintain stability and continue its growth during this prosperous period. A major turning point came when Akhenaten introduced dramatic religious reforms. He shifted focus from traditional gods to the worship of a single divine source associated with the sun. This change disrupted long-standing practices and created tension within the kingdom. Temples dedicated to older deities lost support, and priests who once held significant influence faced uncertainty. The relocation of the capital further pushed Egypt into unfamiliar territory. These decisions altered everyday life and created divisions among officials and citizens. Akhenaten's reforms became one of the most debated and disruptive periods of the New Kingdom. Akhenaten's decision to move the capital to a new city dedicated to his religious vision added additional strain to the kingdom. Building an entirely new center required massive resources and labor. The shift forced officials to adapt quickly, and many struggled with the sudden changes. Traditional power structures weakened as the new religious system took priority. While Akhenaten believed the new city symbolized a fresh start, the rapid transformation destabilized the government. The capital's relocation marked a bold but costly experiment that challenged the balance Egypt had worked hard to maintain. The religious changes under Akhenaten disrupted established traditions across Egypt. Temples fell out of use, and communities that relied on them for economic and social support faced uncertainty. Many citizens struggled to adjust to a system that replaced familiar beliefs with unfamiliar rules. Priests who once managed major centers lost influence, creating new power struggles. The cultural shift affected everyday life, from festivals to local customs. These tensions made it difficult for the kingdom to function smoothly. As dissatisfaction grew, it became clear that the reforms challenged more than religion. They threatened the unity that held Egypt together. After Akhenaten's death, leaders moved quickly to restore the traditional religious system. Temples reopened, and abandoned practices were revived to rebuild trust among the population. Officials returned to previous duties, and the capital shifted back to established centers. This restoration brought relief to many who had struggled under the new system. The return to familiar customs re-established order and repaired relationships with regions that had resisted change. This transition marked a return to stability and reinforced the importance of balancing tradition with leadership. Egypt regained its foundation, preparing for future rulers to rebuild its strength. Tutankhamun played a symbolic role in restoring balance to Egypt. His reign focused on re-establishing traditional worship, repairing temples, and reinforcing the authority of the old capital. Though young, he represented a return to familiar practices that brought comfort to the kingdom. Advisors worked closely with him to rebuild stability and repair damage caused by earlier reforms. The restoration of shrines and ceremonies helped reconnect the population to long-standing beliefs. While his rule was short, it became an important step in bringing Egypt back to its cultural roots and preparing the way for stronger leaders who would follow. After restoring traditional practices, Egypt turned its attention to strengthening its presence beyond the Nile Valley. New rulers focused on rebuilding military power and regaining control of territories that had been lost or weakened. These leaders emphasized discipline, organization, and long-term strategy. Their efforts allowed Egypt to recover its influence in the region and prepare for major campaigns. By investing in training and logistics, the kingdom regained confidence and moved toward a new phase of expansion. The stage was set for rulers who would take Egypt's power to unprecedented levels and define the next era of the new kingdom. Seti I emerged as a strong leader determined to restore Egypt's dominance. He launched campaigns to secure borders, reclaim territory, and expand influence. His military strategy focused on swift action and precise planning. Seti strengthened garrisons, trained troops, and established order in regions that had experienced instability. His victories restored confidence in Egypt's ability to control distant lands. Seti's reign marked the beginning of a renewed era of strength, laying the groundwork for his successor to pursue even greater ambitions. His leadership restored stability and positioned Egypt for a future defined by bold expansion and monumental achievements. Ramses VI, one of Egypt's most influential rulers, expanded the kingdom through massive building projects and extensive military campaigns. His leadership brought attention to Egypt's power and ambition. He invested heavily in monuments, temples, and cities that showcased Egypt's wealth and engineering skill. Ramses aimed to create structures that would last for ages, ensuring his legacy endured. His ambitious projects demanded large workforces and strong administration. Under his rule, Egypt reached new levels of visibility and influence, becoming a dominant force in the ancient world. Ramses' reign defined the height of monumental construction and political confidence. One of Ramses VII's most iconic achievements was the construction of Abu Simbel, a monumental complex carved into a cliff in southern Egypt. The massive statues and detailed chambers reflected unmatched craftsmanship and engineering. Dedicated to Ramses and the gods, the site symbolized power, authority, and Egypt's ability to execute bold projects far from the capital. The complex served both ceremonial and political purposes, demonstrating control over strategic regions. Its impressive presence strengthened Egypt's southern frontier and displayed the kingdom's architectural mastery. Abu Simbel remains a testament to the ambition and skill that defined Ramses's long reign. The Battle of Kadesh became one of the most significant conflicts of Ramses II's rule. Egypt and the Hittites clashed over control of important territories in the Levant. The confrontation revealed the strength and complexity of ancient warfare, involving chariots, infantry, and intricate strategies. Although the battle ended without a clear victor, it demonstrated Egypt's military resilience. Ramses used the event to reinforce his reputation as a powerful leader. The conflict showed the challenges of maintaining influence in contested regions, and highlighted the need for diplomacy in addition to military strength to secure long-term stability. Following years of tension with the Hittites, Egypt and its rival signed one of the earliest known peace treaties. This agreement brought stability to contested regions and reduced the risks of future conflict. The treaty allowed both powers to focus on internal development rather than constant warfare. Diplomatic exchanges and formal alliances strengthened relationships between the two kingdoms. This move showcased Egypt's ability to balance military strength with strategic negotiation. The peace treaty reinforced Ramses II's image as a leader capable of securing long-term security for his people while maintaining Egypt's influential presence in the region. Ramses II continued to use construction as a tool for reinforcing his legacy and projecting authority. New temples, statues, and city expansions appeared across the kingdom, each representing Egypt's prosperity and his personal power. These projects employed thousands of workers, supported by efficient administrative systems. The visibility of his monuments reminded citizens and foreign visitors of Egypt's strength. Architecture became a key part of his political strategy, reinforcing loyalty and ensuring his achievements would remain long after his reign. The widespread building programs reflected Egypt's high level of organization and confidence during this period. As Egypt expanded its influence, neighboring powers began responding with their own military and political strategies. Competition for territories created growing pressure along the borders. Some regions resisted Egyptian control, requiring additional campaigns to maintain dominance. These ongoing challenges placed strain on Egypt's resources and military forces. The constant need to defend distant territories revealed the difficulties of managing a vast empire. Though Egypt remained strong, the demands of expansion began testing the kingdom's stability. These pressures hinted at future complications that would slowly erode the momentum built during the height of the new kingdom. Economic strain became more noticeable as Egypt struggled to support distant territories and large-scale construction projects. Maintaining armies, supplying garrisons, and funding temples required continuous resources. When harvest fell short or trade routes were disrupted, the state faced financial difficulties. Officials worked to manage budgets, but the demands of running an empire made balance difficult. These economic pressures affected the availability of supplies and delayed certain projects. The need to allocate resources carefully grew more urgent, revealing weaknesses that had been hidden during more prosperous periods. The stability of the empire began showing signs of stress. Internal problems surfaced as workers responsible for temple construction and tomb building protested due to irregular payments. Delays in food rations and supplies highlighted how stretched the kingdom's resources had become. These protests, recorded in ancient documents, show how everyday people felt the impact of Egypt's financial strain. Officials struggled to meet obligations while dealing with pressure across the empire. The unrest signaled a shift in the balance between laborers and state authority. These disruptions weakened trust in leadership and exposed deeper issues within Egypt's administrative structure, showing that even powerful kingdoms faced challenges among their own workforce. Temple priests gained increasing influence as Egypt continued to experience internal strain. Their control over wealth, land, and religious authority made them powerful figures capable of shaping political decisions. As pharaohs struggled to maintain resources, temples accumulated more assets through donations and economic activity. This growing imbalance created competition between the monarchy and religious institutions. The shift in power weakened the central government's control and complicated the administration of the kingdom. These developments marked another turning point that contributed to the gradual decline of the new kingdom's stability and dominance. As pharaohs struggled to balance resources and influence, temple institutions gained even more power. Their control over large estates and donations allowed them to function almost like separate governments. Priests managed farms, storage centers, and local labor forces without relying on royal approval. This growing independence weakened the pharaoh's authority and created tension between the palace and religious centers. With resources shifting away from the monarchy, leaders found it increasingly difficult to maintain order and support military operations. These changes deepened the instability spreading through the kingdom, signaling that the new kingdom's central structure was beginning to unravel. Foreign pressures intensified as groups known as the Sea Peoples entered the region, disrupting trade and attacking coastal settlements. Their unpredictable movements forced Egypt to defend multiple fronts while already dealing with internal strain. Battles with these groups tested the kingdom's weakened military, which struggled to match earlier levels of strength and coordination. The Sea Peoples' attacks damaged important trade connections that Egypt relied on for essential goods. Their presence contributed to the growing sense that Egypt's control over its borders was slipping. The increasing difficulty of managing both internal and external threats pushed the kingdom toward further decline. Losses against foreign invaders and disruptions in trade weakened Egypt's international power. Territories once under Egyptian control began asserting independence or falling into the hands of rival kingdoms. Officials in distant regions found it hard to maintain loyalty without strong support from the capital. The shrinking influence made it difficult to negotiate favorable treaties or maintain alliances. Egypt's neighbors recognized the decline and adjusted their strategies accordingly. As the geopolitical landscape shifted, Egypt struggled to hold its place. This reduced influence marked a dramatic shift from the dominance it once displayed during the height of the new kingdom. As foreign threats increased, Egypt's focus shifted from expanding its influence to simply preserving stability. Leaders concentrated their efforts on protecting borders and maintaining control over essential regions. This defensive approach contrasted sharply with the bold campaigns of earlier centuries. Limited resources forced rulers to choose priorities carefully, and many outlying territories were abandoned. The kingdom's attention turned inward as it tried to prevent further fragmentation. This shift in strategy revealed how far Egypt had moved from its days of dominance, highlighting the significant challenges it now faced both inside and outside its borders. Expansion was no longer possible, and survival became the new goal. Egypt could not afford long campaigns or heavy losses, so pharaohs focused on protecting key cities and trade routes. The government attempted to strengthen defenses, but limited resources made it difficult to maintain large armies. As the kingdom struggled to maintain control, its influence over surrounding regions faded. Local leaders in border areas acted more independently, further weakening centralized power. This period marked a clear turning point, as Egypt transitioned from an empire of ambition to a state trying to prevent collapse. The era of dominance was ending. Regional governors gained more independence as the central government weakened. These leaders controlled valuable farmland and local armies, giving them leverage over the shrinking monarchy. Some governors expanded their authority by forming alliances with neighboring districts, creating pockets of power that operated almost autonomously. Their growing influence made it difficult for pharaohs to enforce national policies. As regional leaders prioritized their own interests, the kingdom became more fragmented. This shift created tensions that further strained Egypt's unity. The rise of powerful governors marked another step toward the breakup of the once tightly controlled new kingdom. The administrative structure that had supported Egypt for centuries began breaking down. Communication between the capital and distant regions slowed, and officials struggled to collect taxes or enforce laws. Corruption became more common as local leaders took advantage of the weakening central government. Without strong oversight, resources were mismanaged and important projects were neglected. These problems damaged public trust and made daily life more difficult for ordinary citizens. The unraveling administration demonstrated how deeply Egypt's internal organization had deteriorated. The loss of coordination made recovery increasingly unlikely, pushing the kingdom further toward division and instability. Managing resources became a growing challenge as economic strain worsened. Irrigation systems fell into disrepair, farmland suffered, and reduced harvests made it difficult to support the population. Trade, once a source of wealth, became unreliable due to foreign interference and internal fragmentation. the lack of a stable food supply placed pressure on families and weakened confidence in leadership. Egypt's ability to sustain large construction projects and military operations diminished rapidly. These resource shortages made rebuilding the nation nearly impossible. The combined impact of economic decline and administrative failure accelerated the breakdown of the new kingdom's foundations. The weakened state could not withstand the combined pressures of economic strain, foreign attacks, and internal division. As central control eroded, the new kingdom collapsed, ending one of Egypt's most powerful eras. Territories once controlled by Egypt became independent or fell to rival powers. The nation fractured into segments led by separate rulers with competing agendas. This collapse marked a dramatic turning point in Egyptian history, showing how even the strongest empires could fall when faced with overwhelming challenges. The end of the new kingdom led Egypt into the Third Intermediate Period, defined by shifting alliances and fragmented power. Egypt entered the Third Intermediate Period with its authority divided among competing dynasties. Multiple groups claimed leadership over different parts of the country, creating a complex network of shifting power. These rival factions formed alliances based on convenience rather than unity, and territory often changed hands. Without a single ruler capable of controlling the entire kingdom, Egypt struggled to maintain stability. Local traditions shaped policies in each region, and connections between cities weakened. This fractured environment limited Egypt's ability to project influence beyond its borders. The kingdom had become a set of competing states rather than a unified civilization. One major power during this period came from Libyan groups who had settled in Egypt over earlier centuries. Their leaders eventually rose to authority and established dynasties that blended Libyan traditions with Egyptian practices. These rulers controlled key regions and attempted to stabilize local governments. Their influence introduced new military structures and community leadership styles. While their rule varied across regions, they maintained a degree of order during a time of widespread fragmentation. Their presence demonstrated how foreign groups could integrate into Egyptian society and shape its political landscape. Libya's involvement became a defining feature of this era. As Libyan rulers governed parts of Egypt, Nubian kings from the south began gaining influence. Their strong kingdom expanded northward, taking advantage of Egypt's weakened state. Nubian leaders admired Egyptian culture and sought to restore older traditions that had been neglected during years of instability. Their rise introduced a new wave of leadership that blended southern influences with Egyptian customs. The expansion of Nubian power marked a significant shift in regional dynamics, revealing how far Egypt's control had diminished. Their growing presence set the stage for a major change in authority across the Nile Valley. The Nubian kingdom continued pushing north until its rulers gained control over much of Egypt. They established a new dynasty that aimed to revive the values and structures of earlier eras. These kings supported temple construction and promoted religious practices that aligned with ancient traditions. Their leadership brought a sense of renewal, but their presence also challenged rival factions within the country. Although they admired Egyptian culture, their rule reshaped political alliances and introduced new dynamics. The Nubian dynasty demonstrated that Egypt's identity could survive under foreign leadership even during times of significant change. Nubian rulers invested heavily in restoring monuments, temples, and cultural practices that had declined during periods of fragmentation. Their efforts strengthened religious institutions and celebrated Egypt's past achievements. They positioned themselves as protectors of traditional values and emphasized continuity with earlier dynasties. This cultural revival inspired loyalty among many Egyptians who longed for stability. However, their rule also faced resistance from rival leaders and external threats. Despite challenges, the Nubian dynasty contributed significantly to preserving Egyptian traditions during a critical moment in the nation's history, ensuring that important elements of culture continued to thrive. A new threat emerged as the Assyrians, a powerful empire from the northeast, turned their attention toward Egypt. Known for their disciplined armies and advanced siege techniques, the Assyrians posed a serious challenge. Their expansionist goals brought them into conflict with Egyptian territories, especially those under Nubian control. Assyrian campaigns pushed deep into the Nile Valley, overwhelming local defenses. Their presence introduced a new level of military pressure that Egypt had not faced in generations. The strength and speed of the Assyrian advance revealed the vulnerability of Egypt's divided leadership and weakened infrastructure. The Assyrians used organized strategies, advanced weaponry, and coordinated assaults to overpower Egyptian and Nubian forces. Their armies moved swiftly, targeting key fortresses and cities to break resistance. The psychological impact of their campaigns spread fear across the region. Local rulers struggled to mount effective defenses, and many territories fell quickly. The Assyrian invasion exposed Egypt's inability to respond as a unified state. Their military superiority reshaped the political landscape and forced Egyptian leaders to confront the reality of their weakened position. The invasion marked another significant foreign intrusion that further destabilized the kingdom. After periods of foreign influence and internal fragmentation, a native Egyptian ruler named Ptahhmtikpur managed to re-establish centralized authority through strategic alliances, careful diplomacy, and strong leadership. He brought much of Egypt under unified control once again. Ptahhmtik restored confidence by stabilizing government systems and renewing military strength. His reign marked a brief moment of recovery in which Egypt regained some of its independence and influence. Although the challenges surrounding the kingdom remained significant, Ptahhmtik's success demonstrated that strong leadership could rebuild order even after long periods of division and foreign domination. Under Ptahhmtik I and his successors, trade and construction projects gained momentum once again. Leaders focused on rebuilding cities, repairing temples, and revitalizing economic networks. Diplomatic relations improved with neighboring powers, allowing Egypt to function more independently. The renewed stability encouraged cultural expression and strengthened national identity. Although the kingdom no longer held the same influence it once had during its peak, this period showed that Egypt could still thrive under capable leadership. The revival brought a sense of hope and demonstrated resilience during a time when many believed the nation's best days had passed. Despite the progress made under Ptahhmtik I, Egypt faced increasing pressure from the expanding Persian Empire. Persia had already conquered several neighboring regions and sought to extend its control further west. Egyptian leaders attempted to strengthen alliances and build defenses, but the Persian military was highly organized and well-equipped. Their growing influence created tension across the region, and Egypt struggled to maintain independence. The looming threat forced Egyptian rulers to prepare for a confrontation that would test the limits of their authority and resources. Persia's rise marked a new phase in the struggle for control over Egypt. The Persians eventually invaded Egypt, bringing the kingdom under foreign rule. Their conquest introduced new administrative practices and shifted control away from native leadership. Persian governors managed important regions, and Egypt became part of a larger empire with broader goals. While traditional customs continued, the change in authority altered power structures and limited Egypt's independence. The population adjusted to new expectations and systems imposed by the Persian rulers. This period reflected the challenges Egypt faced as it navigated life under yet another powerful foreign force, highlighting the difficulties of maintaining sovereignty in a rapidly changing world. Egyptian rulers attempted to resist Persian domination whenever opportunities arose. Rebellions and uprisings took place as native leaders sought to reclaim control, but most efforts were crushed due to Persia's superior military strength. These repeated attempts revealed how deeply Egyptians valued independence and how strongly they resisted foreign rule. While some regions experienced brief moments of autonomy, lasting freedom remained out of reach. The constant struggle weakened local resources and deepened divisions. Egypt's continued resistance demonstrated its determination but also highlighted the limits of its power during a time when foreign empires dominated the region. After years under Persian control, Egypt managed to regain independence for a short period. Native rulers re-established authority and attempted to strengthen defenses to prevent future invasions. They focused on rebuilding administration, repairing temples, and restoring national pride. However, the window of independence was limited, and rival forces continued watching Egypt closely. Although this period brought relief and renewed confidence, the kingdom remained vulnerable. The temporary freedom showed that Egypt still possessed the ability to rise, but sustaining that independence required resources and unity that were becoming harder to maintain. Persia regained control of Egypt during a second conquest, reinforcing its influence over the region. The renewed Persian rule imposed stricter oversight, reducing the power of local leaders. Egyptian resistance weakened as resources dwindled and pressure increased. the constant shifts in authority created instability and confused the administrative structure. Persian rule became a defining part of daily life, shaping economic systems, military decisions, and political direction. As Egypt adapted once again to foreign oversight, the long pattern of internal weakness and external control continued, revealing how difficult it had become for the kingdom to stand independently. The frequent changes in leadership created widespread uncertainty across Egypt. Competing claims to power, shifting alliances, and inconsistent policies made it difficult for the population to rely on stable governance. The economic challenges mounted, and the kingdom's once strong institutions weakened further. Without consistent leadership, maintaining order became increasingly difficult. Many Egyptians felt caught between rival factions and foreign rulers, unsure of what direction the country would take next. This instability defined the later stages of Egypt's independence and prepared the way for yet another major shift in power as a new foreign leader approached. A monumental shift occurred when Alexander the Great entered Egypt during his campaigns across the region. Unlike previous invaders, he presented himself as a liberator from Persian control, earning support from many Egyptians. His arrival ended the second period of Persian rule and introduced a new era of leadership. Alexander respected certain cultural traditions which helped ease the transition. His presence marked the beginning of a major transformation that would reshape Egyptian identity and connect it to a broader Mediterranean world. Egypt's future was now tied to the expanding influence of Greek culture and political power. Alexander's arrival marked a turning point, not just politically, but culturally. He allowed Egyptians to maintain long-standing traditions while introducing Greek administrative structures that linked Egypt to a wider world. His presence brought stability after years of shifting control. Although his time in Egypt was brief, he ordered the construction of a new city that would serve as a bridge between cultures. His leadership reshaped the direction of the kingdom and opened the door for a new ruling dynasty. Egypt entered a period where Greek and Egyptian identities blended, forming a unique chapter in its long history. Alexander founded Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, choosing a strategic location that connected Egypt to major sea routes. The city was designed with wide streets, organized districts, and a strong focus on trade. It soon became a hub for merchants, scholars, and travelers from across the ancient world. The blend of Greek planning and Egyptian culture created a vibrant environment that encouraged learning and commerce. Alexandria's influence grew quickly, and it became one of the most important cities of the ancient era. Its foundation marked the beginning of a new era where Egypt played a central role in global exchange. After Alexander's death, his empire fractured among his generals, and Egypt fell under the control of Ptolemy, one of his closest allies. Ptolemy established a dynasty that blended Greek administration with Egyptian customs to gain support from the population. Under his leadership, Alexandria grew even more influential, becoming a center for scholarship, innovation, and trade. The new dynasty brought fresh ideas while respecting long-standing traditions. This balance allowed the kingdom to function smoothly during a transitional period. The foundation Ptolemy created shaped Egypt's political and cultural direction for nearly 3 centuries under Greek rule. Ptolemy secured his rule by adopting aspects of Egyptian religious and political traditions. He presented himself as a legitimate pharaoh while maintaining Greek customs within his court. This merging of cultures created a distinct identity for the dynasty. Temples remained active, festivals continued, and religious art blended Greek and Egyptian styles. The Ptolemies relied on these traditions to connect with local populations and maintain stability in a diverse society. Their ability to combine administrative efficiency with cultural respect helped them sustain long periods of relative peace, allowing Egypt to thrive despite foreign leadership. Under Ptolemaic rule, Egypt enjoyed centuries of independence, but these years were filled with internal rivalries and shifting alliances. Royal family members frequently competed for power, creating tension within the court. At the same time, Greek and Egyptian communities interacted daily, influencing each other's customs, language, and art. Despite political challenges, Egypt remained wealthy and culturally influential. Its resources attracted interest from rising powers across the Mediterranean. The Ptolemies worked to preserve their independence, but internal conflict and external pressure made the stability of the dynasty increasingly fragile as time passed. The Ptolemies maintained authority by relying on both their Greek heritage and their roles as traditional Egyptian rulers. They controlled vast estates, managed rich agricultural lands, and oversaw busy trading centers. Their rule strengthened Egypt's economy and allowed it to remain a major regional power. However, the reliance on foreign advisors and mercenaries sometimes created tension with native Egyptians. Balancing these groups became increasingly difficult as political stress grew. The dynasty's attempts to satisfy both communities shaped daily life and reinforced how complex leadership had become in a kingdom pulled in multiple directions. Alexandria emerged as a cultural powerhouse, known for its libraries, museums, and diverse population. Scholars from across the world traveled there to study mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. The city's port became one of the busiest in the Mediterranean, bringing goods, ideas, and knowledge from distant lands. Its blend of cultures created an environment unlike any other in Egypt's long history. The city's influence stretched across continents, making it a symbol of learning and progress. Alexandria's rise showed how the Ptolemaic era reshaped Egypt into a major center for intellectual and commercial activity. Despite Egypt's economic strength, the Ptolemaic dynasty suffered from frequent internal power struggles. Family members fought over succession, forming rival factions that weakened national unity. These conflicts often drew foreign powers into Egyptian politics, as different claimants sought outside support to secure the throne. The instability strained resources and eroded confidence among the population. As these disputes grew more intense, Egypt's ability to act independently diminished. The kingdom's future increasingly depended on navigating complex relationships with rising Mediterranean powers, which now watched Egypt more closely than ever before. Rome's expanding influence became an unavoidable force shaping Egypt's future. As Roman power spread across the Mediterranean, Egypt's wealth and resources made it an attractive partner and target. The Ptolemies formed alliances with Roman leaders to maintain independence, but these partnerships came with obligations and political entanglements. Rome's involvement grew deeper with each agreement, gradually reducing Egypt's freedom to act without foreign approval. Egypt's rulers understood that their choices carried significant consequences, and every decision brought them closer to a moment when Roman interests and Egyptian autonomy would collide. Egypt became increasingly entangled in Roman politics as competing Roman leaders sought influence over the kingdom. The Ptolemies relied on Rome for protection against internal rivals, but this support gave Rome leverage. Egyptian resources, especially grain, became vital to Roman stability, making the kingdom strategically important. With each alliance and intervention, Egypt lost a small part of its independence. Political decisions made far from the Nile shaped the fate of the country. These connections pulled Egypt into conflicts that had little to do with its own interests, setting the stage for dramatic confrontations ahead. Cleopatra VII rose to power during one of the most unstable moments in Ptolemaic history. Intelligent, strategic, and determined, she worked to stabilize the kingdom and restore its influence. She understood that Egypt could not stand alone against powerful foreign rivals, so she used diplomacy, economic planning, and political alliances to defend the nation's independence. Cleopatra embraced Egyptian traditions while also navigating the complex world of Roman politics. Her leadership brought renewed energy to the kingdom, but the challenges she faced were larger than any ruler had confronted in centuries. Cleopatra focused on strengthening Egypt internally before addressing external threats. She worked to stabilize finances, improve administration, and renew agricultural productivity. Her leadership restored confidence among officials and citizens who had grown weary of internal conflict. She reestablished key trade routes and fortified important cities. This internal recovery allowed Cleopatra to negotiate from a position of strength when dealing with foreign leaders. Her efforts reflected a deep understanding of Egypt's needs during a time of intense pressure. By rebuilding the core of the kingdom, she created a foundation for the political battles still ahead. Cleopatra built strategic alliances with powerful Roman figures to protect Egypt's independence. These alliances gave her access to military support, political leverage, and broader influence across the Mediterranean. She used diplomacy carefully, understanding that Rome's shifting leadership made every decision risky. These partnerships helped her navigate competing factions that threatened Egypt from both inside and outside its borders. Cleopatra's political skill allowed her to maintain stability during years of intense uncertainty. However, her involvement in Roman power struggles exposed Egypt to dangers that would eventually reshape the fate of the entire kingdom. As tensions rose within Rome, Egypt became caught in the middle of conflicts between powerful Roman leaders. Cleopatra worked tirelessly to keep Egypt secure while balancing unpredictable alliances. Each shift in Roman politics brought new threats and forced rapid decisions. These pressures strained Egypt's resources and placed the kingdom in an increasingly vulnerable position. Despite her strategic efforts, Cleopatra found that Egypt's future depended heavily on events unfolding far from its borders. The growing instability in Rome created a dangerous environment that would soon force Cleopatra into critical choices with lasting consequences. The struggle between competing Roman factions escalated, and Egypt's involvement became unavoidable. Cleopatra supported leaders who promised to protect Egypt's independence, but these decisions placed the kingdom directly into Rome's civil disputes. Battles across the Mediterranean shaped Egypt's future even before the fighting reached its borders. As rival Roman armies clashed, Egypt prepared for the possibility of invasion or political collapse. The stakes grew higher with every shift in allegiance. Cleopatra knew the outcome of these conflicts would determine whether Egypt remained a sovereign kingdom or fell under foreign rule once again. Egypt's influence weakened as Roman conflicts intensified. Cleopatra faced mounting challenges as Egypt's resources were stretched thin. The kingdom's position in regional politics became fragile, and competitors sensed an opportunity to shape its future. Roman leaders debated Egypt's fate as part of their own power struggles. Cleopatra recognized that her options were narrowing, and Egypt's independence depended on her ability to navigate increasingly hostile political conditions. The growing tension signaled that a final confrontation was approaching, one that would determine the future of Egypt and the end of an era that stretched back 3,000 years. The decisive conflict came when Roman forces led by Octavian confronted Cleopatra and her last remaining ally. Their defeat removed Egypt's final line of defense. Cleopatra returned to Egypt knowing the kingdom could no longer resist Rome's power. The loss marked the collapse of the Ptolemaic dynasty's authority. Egypt faced the reality that foreign control was now unavoidable. The outcome of this confrontation would shape the region's future for centuries. Cleopatra's position grew desperate, and she prepared for decisions that would define the final chapter of Egypt's long era of independent rule. Cleopatra's defeat allowed Rome to claim full control over Egypt. Her death symbolized the end of native leadership across a kingdom that had once ruled much of the ancient world. Roman forces moved quickly to secure major cities, ports, and administrative centers. Egypt, long admired for its wealth and culture, became a province governed by Rome. This transition ended thousands of years of pharaonic rule. The fall of the Ptolemaic dynasty marked one of the most significant turning points in ancient history, shifting Egypt into a new role within a rapidly expanding empire. With Egypt absorbed into the Roman Empire, new administrative systems replaced those established by previous dynasties. Roman governors controlled the region, collecting taxes and managing trade routes that supplied Rome with vital grain. Despite the change in leadership, many Egyptian traditions continued. Temples operated, local customs persisted, and communities maintained long-standing practices. The blend of Roman authority and Egyptian culture created a unique social environment. Although Egypt no longer controlled its own destiny, its identity remained strong. Roman rule transformed political structures, but the foundations of Egyptian life endured beneath the shifting systems of empire. Egyptian religious traditions continued to play an important role, even under Roman oversight. Temples remained significant centers of worship and community activity. Priests maintained rituals that had existed for centuries, keeping cultural memory alive. While Roman influence brought new customs and architectural styles, Egyptians preserved their heritage through art, ceremonies, and storytelling. This continuity allowed ancient beliefs to survive even as political power changed hands. Egypt's ability to maintain cultural strength during foreign rule demonstrated the resilience of its identity and the depth of its traditions, which had been built across millennia. As Roman culture spread through Egypt, writing systems, artistic styles, and religious practices slowly changed. Greek and Roman influences shaped education, architecture, and city planning. Some temples were converted for new purposes, while others faded as populations shifted toward urban centers like Alexandria. Over time, traditional hieroglyphic writing became less common, replaced by scripts influenced by Greek language. Although change was gradual, each shift marked a step away from the traditions that once defined Egypt's civilization. These transitions revealed how cultural identity could evolve under long-term foreign rule while still honoring elements of the past. Older practices gradually faded across the country as new generations grew up in a society shaped by Roman systems. Traditional priesthoods lost influence, and ancient temples received fewer resources. Daily life became more connected to Mediterranean culture than to the customs that once dominated the Nile Valley. Despite these changes, echoes of Egypt's past survived in art, language, and community rituals. The transformation showed how civilizations evolve when exposed to new powers and ideas. Although Egypt adapted to its new reality, traces of its former greatness remained visible for centuries to come. The ancient pharaonic system that had guided Egypt for thousands of years eventually disappeared. Without native rulers, the traditional cycle of dynasties, rituals, and royal succession came to an end. Roman control reshaped the political structure and removed the institutions that once defined the kingdom's identity. While Egyptians continued practicing aspects of their culture, the framework that supported pharaonic rule could not survive under foreign authority. This marked the final closure of an era that had shaped history. The fall of Egypt's ancient system became a reminder of the rise and decline experienced by even the most enduring civilizations. Although Egypt no longer ruled itself, its legacy influenced cultures far beyond its borders. Greek thinkers, Roman architects, and later scholars across the world studied Egyptian knowledge, art, and engineering. The achievements of ancient Egypt, its monuments, writing, medicine, and mathematics, continued to inspire new generations. Explorers uncovered tombs, historians examined records, and artists reimagined its symbols. The impact of Egypt's 3,000-year journey reached across continents and eras. Its contributions shaped human understanding and became part of global history. Egypt's legacy endured long after its political power faded, proving the lasting strength of its civilization. The timeline of ancient Egypt, stretching from small river villages to a massive empire and finally to Roman rule, revealed a civilization defined by resilience, creativity, and transformation. Every era, from unification to pyramid building, from golden ages to foreign invasions, added layers to a story that shaped the world. Egypt's rise and fall showed how power can shift, how cultures adapt, and how legacies survive long after kingdoms disappear. The end of pharaonic rule did not erase its influence. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter where Egypt's memory continued to shape history far beyond its borders.